Eli Parker had spent 6 months learning to lie diplomatically to people who claimed to value truth above everything else, and he was exhausted from the contradiction. The Council of Blades on the Kyvaari homeworld was humanity's best chance at securing critical trade agreements, but every session felt like navigating a minefield where the wrong word could turn business discussions into lethal duels. The Kyvaari built their entire society around honor, combat prowess, and brutal honesty, or at least, what they claimed was honesty. Presiding over today's council session was Commander Seris, a legendary warrior whose reputation for combat excellence was matched only by her intolerance for what she called weak speech. The careful diplomatic language Eli had been using for months. She was imposing even by Kyvaari standards. Tall, armor bearing countless dual marks, bioluminescent patterns displaying cold authority. Her long blade-like ears detected the slightest tremor of fear, and her hand rested casually on her ceremonial sword, as if violence was simply another negotiating tool. The human mediator speaks many words that say nothing, Warlord Kess observed, his frustration evident. 6 months of careful discussion that circles truth without approaching it. This is not how Kyvaari conduct business. Perhaps it is how humans conduct business, another council member suggested. They value safety over honesty. Eli had heard variations of this criticism for weeks. The Kyvaari wanted brutal directness, but any actual directness from him would be taken as mortal insult requiring duels. So he'd learned to speak in careful circles, saying what needed to be said without saying anything that could get him killed. It was diplomatic doublespeak perfected, and it was getting them nowhere. Commander Seris stood, silencing the council with her presence. Her bioluminescent markings shifted to challenging crimson as she addressed Eli directly. Human mediator, you have spent months speaking words that mean nothing, dancing around truth like it will bite you. We Kyvaari value honesty above all else. Her hand tightened on her sword hilt. So I give you this opportunity. Speak your true thoughts about us, about this negotiation, about our people and our ways. Be brave and speak without your careful diplomat's mask. She drew her blade slightly, just enough that Eli could see steel. I promise you safe passage to speak honestly, by my honor as warrior and commander. Tell us what you really think. The council chamber went absolutely silent. Eli's diplomatic training screamed at him to decline politely, to maintain careful distance, to avoid the trap this clearly represented. 6 months of cautious speech had kept him alive if unproductive. But he was also exhausted from the constant performance, frustrated by negotiations that went nowhere, and increasingly convinced that careful lies were worse than dangerous truths. He made a choice that would change everything. You want my honest thoughts? Eli stood, meeting Seris's challenging gaze. Fine. Your culture is built on a foundation of brutality disguised as honor. You claim to value truth, but what you actually value is the willingness to endure violence for speaking it. Your honest society is just constant threat assessment where everyone calculates whether their words are worth getting stabbed over. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Commander Seris drew her sword completely. The blade sang as it left the scabbard, the sound echoing through the frozen council chamber. Every human in Eli's small diplomatic staff looked like they were witnessing his execution. Every Kyvaari watched with intense focus, bioluminescent patterns shifting through significant colors. Seris crossed the space between them in 3 fluid steps, her blade held in a grip that could strike or defend with equal facility. Eli forced himself to stand his ground despite every survival instinct screaming to run, to apologize, to take back his words. He'd spoken under oath of safe passage, but Kyvaari honor could be interpreted in ways that made safe passage more technical than actual. Seris stopped directly in front of him, her blade raised, her bioluminescence blazing with extreme emotion. Then she did something that shocked everyone present. She turned the blade and offered Eli the hilt. Chapter 2. You spoke truth, Seris said. her voice carrying absolute authority through the stunned chamber. Brutal, insulting, honest truth that no one has dared speak to this council in decades. You called our honor disguised brutality, and our society constant threat assessment. These words should earn you a duel. She extended the sword further toward Eli. But they are also accurate. We do disguise brutality as honor. We do make every interaction a calculation of whether words are worth violence. And you had the courage to say this knowing it might cost you everything. Her bioluminescence shifted through colors Eli couldn't interpret. This is more honest than any careful diplomat's speech. This is the truth we claim to want, but have been too comfortable to acknowledge. Eli stared at the offered blade, his brain struggling to process what was happening. I don't understand Kyvaari blade customs. Am I accidentally accepting a duel, or a marriage proposal or something? Despite the tension, several Kyvaari made sounds that might have been suppressed laughter. You are accepting acknowledgement, Seris explained. This blade has been in my family for 7 generations. I offer you the privilege of holding it because you demonstrated the courage we claim to demand but rarely encounter. You were invited to speak honestly, and you did, knowing it might destroy you, speaking anyway because truth mattered more than safety. Her ears angled forward, intense focus. That is warrior's courage, even if you carry no blade and know nothing of our combat traditions. Eli took the sword carefully. It was heavier than expected, perfectly balanced, the blade bearing marks suggesting extensive use across generations. Warlord Kess stood, his bioluminescence shifting to colors that looked almost pleased. The human calls us brutal and threatening, and he is correct. Finally, someone with spine to speak truth instead of dancing around it with diplomatic nonsense. But his words were deeply insulting. Another council member protested. Our honor culture is not mere disguised brutality. Isn't it? Seris interrupted, her challenge silencing the objection. When did we last have discussion where participants didn't calculate whether their words would trigger violence? When did honesty stop requiring courage to speak and become comfortable exchange? She turned back to Eli, who still held her family blade awkwardly. You may return my sword. You have honored it by speaking truth worthy of its edge. Eli handed back the blade carefully. So, the negotiations will proceed with actual honesty rather than careful performance of it, Seris declared. The human has shown us what we claim to value. We will match his courage or admit our honor culture is exactly the disguised brutality he named it. Over the following days, the negotiations transformed completely. The Kyvaari engaged with genuine rather than performative interest, responding to Eli's continued brutal honesty, with their own uncomfortable truths about resource limitations and strategic concerns they'd been hiding behind aggressive posturing. But the most significant change was in Commander Seris. She sought Eli's opinion on matters beyond trade agreements, specifically requesting his brutally honest human assessment of Kyvaari practices. Tell me truthfully, she said during a private meeting, do you think our honor culture serves us, or have we become trapped by it? Eli considered his words carefully, then decided that careful words were what had failed before. I think you've built a society where everyone's so focused on appearing honorable that actual honor gets lost. You challenge each other to duels over minor insults, instead of having real conversations about genuine disagreements. Your brutal honesty has become excuse for constant aggression rather than foundation for trust. Seris's bioluminescence shifted through contemplative patterns. I have been thinking similar thoughts for years. But to speak them would be seen as weakness, as questioning the foundations of our culture. So I remained silent while becoming increasingly certain that our honor traditions were becoming self-defeating. And now a human with no combat training and terrible blade-holding technique told our entire council that we disguise brutality as honor. And he was right. She met his eyes. You gave me permission to examine doubts I could not acknowledge. That is valuable gift. I just said what seemed obvious. Your culture claims to value honesty but punishes people for speaking it. That's contradictory. That's obvious to outsider, revolutionary to those trapped within the system. Seris's patterns pulsed with something that might have been gratitude. Thank you for being brave enough to speak truth when invited, knowing the danger. That courage is teaching us things about ourselves we had forgotten to see. Eli realized he'd somehow become more than just a trade negotiator. He'd become a mirror forcing the Kyvaari to examine assumptions they'd stopped questioning. And Commander Seris had become something he hadn't expected. An ally who valued his honesty precisely because it challenged everything her culture took for granted. 2 months after Eli's brutal honesty before the council, Commander Seris summoned him to the training grounds, a request that made his diplomatic staff extremely nervous. Kyvaari don't invite people to training grounds for friendly conversations, his assistant warned. That's where they settle disputes, with blades. She said she wanted my honest assessment of Kyvaari combat training methodologies, Eli replied, though he shared the concern. Could be genuine interest, could be elaborate setup for ritual murder, only one way to find out. The training grounds were exactly what Eli expected. Kyvaari warriors practicing lethal techniques with the casual efficiency of people who'd been doing this since childhood. Seris waited in the center, her practice armor somehow more intimidating than her ceremonial gear. Human mediator, she greeted formally, though her bioluminescence showed warmth. You have observed our society for months now with your outsider perspective. I want that perspective applied to our warrior training. Watch, then tell me what you see. Honestly. Eli watched Kyvaari warriors drill through combat sequences, beautiful, deadly, performed with precision that came from lifelong practice. The movements were ritualized, following traditional forms that had probably been perfected over generations. After an hour, Seris asked, "Your assessment?" "Your warriors are incredibly skilled at killing each other in very specific, traditional ways," Eli said. "Which is great if your opponents also follow those traditions. But you're training for duels, not actual combat. Those forms are predictable to anyone who's studied them. You prioritize looking honorable over being effective." Several nearby warriors stopped practicing, their bioluminescence flashing offended reds. Seris raised a hand, silencing potential objections. "Explain." "You have a beautiful overhead strike that takes 3 preparatory movements and announces itself like a formal invitation. It's honorable because it gives your opponent fair warning. It's also tactically terrible because any enemy who doesn't care about your honor codes will exploit that 3-second telegraph to kill you." Eli gestured to the drilling warriors. "Your entire combat system is built around fighting other Kyvaari who follow the same rules. What happens when you face opponents who don't?" "We adapt," one warrior said defensively. "Do you?" "Because I've been watching, and your adaptation is just variations on the same traditional forms. You're not actually training for unpredictable opponents. You're training to beat other Kyvaari at ritualized combat." The warrior's hand moved toward his blade, but Seris's sharp gesture stopped him. "The human speaks under my protection and at my invitation. His words are harsh but deserve consideration, not challenge." She turned to Eli. "You are saying our warrior tradition prioritizes honor performance over combat effectiveness." "I'm saying that somewhere along the way, your combat training stopped being about winning fights and started being about demonstrating proper form. It's beautiful, it's traditional. It's also going to get you killed if you ever fight someone who doesn't care about Kyvaari honor codes." Seris's bioluminescence shifted through complex patterns, offense, consideration, and something that looked like recognition. "Show me. Demonstrate how someone without honor codes would exploit our traditional forms." "I don't know how to fight. I'm a negotiator." "Exactly. You have no training in our methods, no respect for our traditions, no understanding of honorable combat. That makes you perfect opponent to prove your point. She drew her practice blade. Attack me, however you want. No rules, no honor. Just attempt to defeat me using whatever methods occur to you. Eli stared at her. That's a terrible idea. You're a legendary warrior, and I'm a diplomat who can barely hold a sword properly. This isn't going to prove anything except that trained fighters beat untrained ones. It will prove whether our training accounts for dishonorable tactics or only prepares us for honorable opponents. Attack me, human. That is order, not request. Eli sighed, picked up a practice blade, and immediately threw dirt in Seris's face before rushing her from the side while she was distracted. Seris blocked his clumsy attack easily, but her bioluminescence flashed surprised amber. You threw dirt. That is completely without honor. You said no rules, Eli panted, already exhausted from 3 seconds of physical activity. Honorable fighting gets you killed by dishonorable opponents. I just proved your training doesn't account for someone who doesn't care about proper form. The watching warrior's bioluminescence shifted through conflicting colors. Offense at the dishonorable tactic mixed with reluctant recognition that Eli's point was valid. Seris lowered her blade. Again, show me other dishonorable tactics our training does not prepare for. What followed was the most educational humiliation the training grounds had witnessed. Eli, completely untrained and physically inferior, demonstrated a dozen ways that someone without honor codes could exploit traditional Kyvaari combat forms. He feinted surrenders. He used the environment as weapons. He targeted joints instead of engaging in proper blade-to-blade combat. He did everything wrong by Kyvaari standards and proved that wrong could be tactically effective. By the end, Seris stood among her warriors, her bioluminescence displaying thoughtful patterns. You have shown us significant gap in our training. We prepare to fight honorable opponents using honorable methods. We do not prepare for those who fight to win, rather than to demonstrate honor. Your honor culture is making you vulnerable, Eli said, breathing hard from unaccustomed exertion. Which loops back to my original assessment. Your honor traditions are becoming liability rather than strength. You are correct. Seris's admission shocked every warrior present. We have let tradition blind us to tactical weakness. This must be addressed. Later, alone with Eli, Seris spoke quietly. You continue to show us uncomfortable truths about ourselves. First our honor culture, now our combat training. Each time, you risk offense for the sake of honesty. Why? Because you invited me to speak honestly, and because pretending problems don't exist doesn't make them go away, it just lets them get worse. Eli met her eyes. You value truth, I'm giving you truth. Even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it is uncomfortable. Her patterns pulsed grateful amber. Thank you, Eli Parker, for having courage to speak what we need to hear rather than what we want to hear. For showing us that our traditions require examination, not just preservation. For being honest even when dishonesty would be safer. Does this mean I'm not getting stabbed for throwing dirt at a legendary warrior commander? This time, Seris said, but her bioluminescence showed amusement. Next time, I will anticipate the dirt. 6 months after Eli called the Kyvaari's honor culture disguised brutality and somehow survived, he found himself serving as permanent human liaison, a position that required regularly delivering uncomfortable truths to a society built on taking offense. The role would have been impossible without Commander Seris. She'd become his unexpected ally, someone who not only valued his brutal honesty but actively sought it, especially when it challenged Kyvaari assumptions others wouldn't dare question. The council is debating whether to expand our warrior training to younger children, Seris told him during one meeting. They believe starting combat education earlier will produce superior warriors. Your honest assessment. You're already producing warriors so obsessed with honor codes that they're vulnerable to anyone who doesn't follow those codes. Starting that indoctrination earlier just means more years of learning tactical weaknesses disguised as tradition. Eli didn't soften his words anymore. You don't need better warriors. You need warriors who understand that honor is tool, not religion. Seris's bioluminescence pulsed with complex emotions. If I said this to the council, they would challenge me to duels for questioning our foundational traditions. But you can say it because you are outsider under my protection. You have become my voice for truths I cannot speak. That's a depressing commentary on your honor culture. Yes, it is. She smiled slightly, a gesture she'd learned from him. Which is why your presence is valuable. You force us to examine contradictions we have learned to ignore. The real test came when Warlord Kess proposed a challenge. A formal honor duel between Kyvaari and human warriors to demonstrate proper respect for combat traditions. The implicit threat was clear. Humans would participate in Kyvaari honor culture or be seen as cowards unworthy of partnership. We can't accept, Eli's diplomatic staff argued. Our fighters aren't trained in their combat forms. We'll lose badly and look weak. Or we fight our way and prove that honor codes are tactical liability, Eli countered. The duel was scheduled as grand spectacle. Kyvaari champion versus human volunteer, fighting under traditional honor rules. Except Eli convinced the human fighter to ignore every rule that didn't serve tactical effectiveness. The result was shocking. Human fighter less skilled, less experienced, won by using dishonorable tactics that exploited the predictability of traditional Kyvaari forms. Dirt throwing, feinted surrenders, environmental weapons, joint targeting. Everything Eli had demonstrated months ago in the training grounds. The Kyvaari audience's bioluminescence flashed through outraged reds. Warlord Kess stood, fury evident. This is mockery of our traditions. Dishonor of our sacred combat forms. Eli stood to respond, and Seris's hand moved to her sword, not threatening him, but ready to defend him if needed. You invited us to demonstrate respect for combat, Eli said clearly. We demonstrated that combat is about winning, not about performing traditions. Your champion fought honorably and lost to someone who fought effectively. That's not mockery, that's lesson you needed to learn. You dare. I dare because Commander Seris invited me months ago to speak truth, and the truth is that your honor culture has made you weak. You're so focused on appearing honorable that you've forgotten why combat exists, to survive, to protect, to win when it matters. Your traditions are beautiful, but beauty doesn't win fights against opponents who don't share your values. The chamber erupted in challenges and objections, but Seris's voice cut through the chaos. The human is correct. Her words silenced the council. I have spent months examining our traditions through his outsider perspective. We have let honor performance replace honor practice. We have confused tradition with effectiveness. And we have become vulnerable because we refuse to adapt our sacred forms to practical realities. You side with the human against your own people. Kess demanded. I side with truth against comfortable lies. The human has shown us uncomfortable truths repeatedly about our honor culture, our combat training, our inability to hear criticism without responding with violence. Each time, we have wanted to challenge him to duels rather than examine whether his criticisms are valid. Seris's bioluminescence blazed defiant gold. I tire of disguising weakness as tradition. If that makes me poor Kyvaari, so be it. But I will not pretend our sacred honor codes are serving us when evidence proves otherwise. The aftermath was turbulent. Conservative Kyvaari demanded Seris's removal from command for betraying cultural values. Progressive factions began questioning other traditions. The council fractured along lines that had been forming since Eli first spoke his brutal truth months ago. But change was happening. Slowly, grudgingly, some Kyvaari began examining whether their traditions served them or trapped them. Weeks later, Eli found Seris on a balcony overlooking the training grounds where warriors now practiced both traditional forms and dishonorable tactics. "You know," Eli said, "when you drew your sword after I called your society constant threat assessment, I was absolutely certain you were going to kill me." "I was considering it," Seris admitted, her bioluminescence pulsing with amusement. "Your words were deeply insulting, accurate but insulting. So why offer me your family blade instead of running me through with it? Because you were brave enough to speak truth when invited, even knowing the danger. That is rarer than combat skill, more valuable than diplomatic careful speech." She met his eyes. "You saw through our honor culture to the brutality underneath and said so to our faces. That took more courage than any duel. With a 7-generation family sword, no pressure. With recognition that you possess quality we claim to value but rarely reward, willingness to speak truth regardless of consequence." Her expression softened. "Thank you, Eli Parker, for being brave enough to speak your thoughts when invited, for showing us that our honest culture had become performance of honesty rather than practice of it, for proving that sometimes the most dangerous weapon is not a blade, but courage to say what everyone knows but no one will acknowledge." "You're welcome, though I'm still not great at holding swords properly. You are excellent at wielding truth, that is weapon enough." She smiled. "Continue speaking honestly, human, especially when we do not want to hear it. That is service more valuable than any trade agreement." Below, Kyvaari warriors trained in both traditional forms and practical adaptations, proof that honor could evolve without being abandoned, that truth could transform without destroying. And Eli realized that being invited to speak bravely, then having a sword drawn in response, had led not to violence but to the most valuable partnership he'd ever built. One founded on dangerous honesty that challenged everything but ultimately created more than comfortable lies ever could.